First contact in the storm. The crystalline spires of Lumeria shimmered under the violet light of twin moons, their faceted surfaces refracting countless rainbow patterns across the mineral-rich plains. Among these natural towers, Dr. Sarah Chen's research vessel plummeted through the turbulent atmosphere, its navigation systems overwhelmed by the planet's intense magnetic storms. Sarah gripped her controls, fighting against the gravitational forces threatening to tear her ship apart. "Come on, hold together," she muttered, watching as warning lights flooded her cockpit. The vessel's hull groaned under the strain, its heat shields barely maintaining integrity against the friction of re-entry. In the crystalline forests below, Prism singer Eryx observed the falling star with mounting horror. Unlike the gentle shimmer of their kind's natural bioluminescence, this object blazed with an artificial fury that sent vibrations through their crystalline form. The stories passed down through generations echoed in their mind. Tales of flesh creatures who devoured other sentient beings, consuming their essence to fuel their terrible machines. Sarah's ship crashed through the upper canopy of crystal formations, each impact sending shockwaves through the vessel's failing structure. With a final desperate maneuver, she managed to angle the craft away from the densest cluster of crystal spires, but couldn't prevent the inevitable impact. The ship slammed into the mineral-rich soil, carving a deep furrow before coming to rest against a massive crystalline formation. Eryx felt the impact resonating through the crystal networks that connected their people. The vibrations carried messages of fear and confusion from nearby communities. As a prism singer, responsible for interpreting the subtle frequencies that their species used to communicate across vast distances, Eryx knew they had a duty to investigate. Yet fear kept them rooted in place, their crystalline form pulsing with anxious energy. Inside the wreckage, Sarah regained consciousness slowly, her head throbbing from the impact. Emergency lights bathed the cockpit in a red glow as she assessed her situation. The ship's primary systems were offline, life support was failing, and the communication array was completely destroyed. She needed to get out before the remaining power cells ruptured. Forcing open the emergency hatch, Sarah emerged into the alien landscape. Her environment suit's sensors immediately began analyzing the atmosphere. Breathable, but with high concentrations of mineral particulates. She kept her helmet sealed as she surveyed the damage. The ship was a total loss, its hull cracked and its vital systems beyond repair with her limited resources. Eryx watched from their hiding place as the flesh creature emerged from the crashed vessel. Their crystalline sensors detected the being's internal heat, so different from their own cool, mineral-based biology. The creature's movements were precise and purposeful, suggesting intelligence that contradicted the ancient tales of mindless consumers. Sarah's suit sensors detected something unusual, subtle vibrations emanating from the surrounding crystal formations, carrying complex patterns that suggested artificial origin. "Hello," she called out, her voice carrying through her suit's external speakers. "I mean no harm. I'm a researcher, a scientist." The vibrations intensified, and Sarah realized they were changing in response to her voice. She activated her suit's specialized sensors, designed to detect and analyze new forms of communication. The patterns were becoming clearer. They weren't random environmental phenomena, but a sophisticated language. Eryx felt their curiosity beginning to overcome their fear. The flesh creature's own vibrations, while crude and unfocused, carried no trace of the predatory harmonics they had been taught to fear. Instead, they detected patterns of inquiry, of discovery, frequencies that resonated with their own scientific interests. Sarah carefully approached one of the larger crystal formations, her hand outstretched. The vibrations grew stronger, and her sensors detected a distinct shift in the pattern. Something was definitely trying to communicate. She reached into her emergency kit and retrieved a small resonance generator, a tool designed for studying geological formations. With careful adjustments, she attempted to replicate the vibration patterns she was receiving. The attempt was clumsy by Lumerian standards, but to Eryx, it represented something revolutionary. A flesh creature trying to learn their language. The frequencies, while imperfect, carried no threat, no hunger, only a desire to understand. Against their better judgment, Eryx emerged from their hiding place, their crystalline form catching the light of the twin moons. Sarah gasped as the alien revealed itself, a being that seemed to be composed entirely of living crystal, its internal structure pulsing with complex patterns of light and energy. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She slowly lowered her resonance generator, realizing that crude attempts at communication might be unnecessary. The being before her was clearly capable of generating its own vibrations with far greater sophistication. Eryx approached cautiously, their form shifting through various frequencies as they attempted to establish basic communication. To their surprise, the flesh creature remained still, its posture suggesting not preparation for attack, but patient observation. The stories had been wrong, or at least incomplete. Sarah activated her suit's universal translator, feeding it the patterns she was detecting. While it couldn't yet decipher the meaning, it could at least identify the mathematical structures underlying the vibrations. She began by transmitting simple sequences, prime numbers, basic geometric ratios, the kind of universal constants that any scientifically advanced species would recognize. The response was immediate. The crystalline being generated a series of harmonics that perfectly complemented her mathematical sequences, adding layers of complexity that suggested not just understanding, but enthusiasm. Sarah smiled behind her helmet. This was why she had become a xenoscientist. For moments of connection that transcended biological differences, a distant rumbling interrupted their exchange. Sarah's suit sensors detected approaching atmospheric disturbances, a storm far more severe than the one that had brought down her ship. The crystalline being's vibrations took on a new urgency, and even without understanding the exact meaning, Sarah recognized a warning when she heard one. The first razor-sharp crystal shards began to fall from the sky, a deadly rain that could shred through even her reinforced environment suit. The crystalline being gestured urgently toward a cave-like opening in a nearby formation. Sarah didn't hesitate. When a native species tells you to take cover, you take cover. As they huddled in the mineral cavity, Sarah realized that her survival now depended on this being she had just met. Her ship was destroyed, her communications were down, and she was facing environmental hazards she barely understood. Yet somehow, watching the play of light through her companion's crystalline form, she felt not fear but excitement. This was an opportunity for true first contact, for breaking down barriers of understanding that had kept their peoples apart. The storm raged outside, but within their shelter, two very different beings began the slow, careful process of learning to communicate. Each had believed the other to be something to fear, a mindless consumer of life, a cold and unfeeling crystal. Yet here they were, proving that understanding could bridge even the widest of gaps between species. Sarah reached for her data tablet, bringing up visual representations of basic concepts. The crystalline being, who would eventually introduce themselves as Eryx, responded with intricate patterns of light and vibration. Together, they took the first steps toward building a common language, while the crystal storm outside reshaped the landscape of Lumeria. Neither knew it yet, but their chance encounter would reshape much more than just the physical terrain. It would transform the relationship between their species forever. Breaking through fear, the crystal storm had passed, but its aftermath left an entirely new challenge for Sarah and Eryx. The violent weather had destabilized many of the towering crystal formations that served as homes for Eryx's people. Through their gradually improving communication, Sarah learned that these structures weren't merely dwellings. They were vital conduits for the vibration-based network that connected the entire Lumerian civilization. Sarah studied the damaged crystals through her suit's analytical displays. The storm had created microscopic fractures throughout the structures, disrupting the delicate resonance patterns that the Lumerians used for long-distance communication. It was like watching a community's neural network slowly crumble. Eryx's vibrations carried frequencies of distress as they monitored the deteriorating structures. Their people had gathered in smaller clusters, their forms pulsing with worried light patterns as they tried to maintain their connections through the damaged network. The situation was more dire than just structural damage. It was threatening the very fabric of their society. "Let me help," Sarah said, knowing Eric's could now interpret her basic meanings through their shared mathematical language. She pulled out her portable spectrometer, designed for analyzing mineral compositions. The Lumerians were living crystals. Perhaps the principles of crystallography could offer a solution. At first, the other Lumerians recoiled from Sarah's presence, their forms flickering with frequencies that even she could recognize as fear. Generations of stories about flesh creatures had left deep impressions, but Eric stepped forward, their vibrations steady and reassuring as they explained how Sarah had sought shelter with them during the storm, how she had demonstrated intelligence and compassion. Sarah worked methodically, scanning the damaged structures while consulting with Eric's. The Lumerians' bodies operated on principles similar to piezoelectric crystals, converting mechanical stress into electrical energy, and vice versa. The storm had disrupted this natural process, but perhaps it could be restored with the right intervention. Using her tablet, Sarah modeled the crystal structure's resonance patterns. She noticed something fascinating. The damage wasn't uniform. Some areas maintained their original frequency, creating islands of stability in the disrupted network. If these stable points could be connected, they might be able to restore the larger communication grid. Eric's watched intently as Sarah explained her findings through a combination of diagrams and simple vibrations. Their form brightened with understanding. Sarah wasn't just offering help. She was demonstrating a new way of thinking about their own biology. The other Lumerians began to gather closer, their fear gradually giving way to curiosity. Working together, Sarah and Eric's identified the strongest remaining resonance points in the crystal network. Sarah modified her resonance generator to amplify these frequencies, while Eric's coordinated with their people to position themselves at optimal points throughout the structure. It was a delicate balance. Too much power could shatter the weakened crystals. Too little would fail to bridge the gaps. The first attempt sent painful discordant vibrations through the network, causing several Lumerians to dim in distress. Sarah quickly adjusted the frequencies, consulting her readings. The second attempt produced a more harmonious result, but still wasn't quite right. She needed to think differently, not just about the physics, but about the living nature of Lumerian crystal. It's not just about the frequency, she realized aloud, watching how the Lumerians naturally adjusted their own resonance to maintain communication. It's about adaptation. She modified her approach, programming the resonance generator to produce not a fixed frequency, but a dynamic range that could shift in response to the network's natural adjustments. This time, when they activated the modified signal, the effect was immediate and beautiful. The stable points in the crystal network began to pulse in sync, their resonance spreading to the damaged areas. The Lumerians positioned throughout the structure added their own frequencies to the harmony, their bodies serving as natural signal boosters. Gradually, the communication network began to rebuild itself. Sarah watched in amazement as the crystal structures actually began to heal, the microscopic fractures filling in as the restored resonance patterns encouraged proper crystal growth. It was like watching a community rebuild its nervous system in real time. The success brought about a dramatic shift in how the Lumerians viewed Sarah. Where before they had seen a potential predator, they now saw a problem solver, someone who could understand and work with their unique biology. The frequencies of fear were replaced by patterns of gratitude and acceptance. Eric's vibrations carried a new tone as they explained to their people how Sarah had approached the problem. The flesh creature hadn't tried to impose foreign solutions. She had taken the time to understand their natural processes and work within them. It was a powerful demonstration that different species could complement each other's strengths. As the crystal network hummed with renewed strength, Sarah found herself surrounded by Lumerians eager to communicate with her. Their vibrations carried complex patterns that her translator was still struggling to fully decode, but the general sentiment was clear. She was no longer an outsider to be feared, but a welcomed ally. That evening, as Lumeria's twin moons cast their violet light across the crystalline landscape, Sarah sat with Eric's, comparing notes on their respective sciences. The Lumerians' understanding of resonance and crystal growth far surpassed human knowledge, while Sarah's insights into external wave manipulation offered them new possibilities they had never considered. "Your people feared us because they thought we consumed other species," Sarah said, her translator converting her words into appropriate vibrations. "But perhaps consumption isn't always destructive. Sometimes it's about absorbing new ideas, new ways of thinking." Eric's form shimmered in what Sarah had come to recognize as their version of agreement. The frequencies they generated spoke of how fear could blind people to possibilities, how preconceptions could become barriers to progress. But they also spoke of hope, hope that this encounter could mark the beginning of a new understanding between their species. As they talked, other Lumerians would occasionally join them, adding their own frequencies to the conversation. Each interaction helped Sarah's translator build a better understanding of their language, while the Lumerians learned to modify their vibrations to be more easily interpreted by human technology. The crystal storm that had seemed like a disaster had become a catalyst for change. It had forced both species to move past their initial fears and work together, proving that the greatest challenges could become opportunities for growth. As Sarah looked out over the healing crystal structures, she realized that she had found something far more valuable than the scientific data she had originally come to collect. She had found a way to bridge the gap between two vastly different forms of life. The repaired crystal network pulsed with stronger, clearer signals than before, carrying the story of this collaboration across the crystalline plains of Lumeria. It was a testament to what could be achieved when fear gave way to understanding, when different species chose to see their differences not as barriers, but as complementary strengths in the grand harmony of the universe. United against chaos. The first warning came through the newly strengthened crystal network as a discordant tremor, a jarring frequency that caused the entire Lumerian community to dim in distress. Sarah, who had spent the past weeks learning to interpret their vibration-based communications, recognized it immediately as a distress signal from a distant settlement. "Raiders," Eric's transmitted, their crystalline form pulsing with urgent patterns. "The obsidian nomads have returned." Through the network, Sarah received fragmentary images, dark crystalline forms moving across the plains, absorbing the life energy of smaller crystal formations, leaving dead zones of inert mineral in their wake. The obsidian nomads were a splinter group of crystal beings who had evolved or modified themselves to consume the energy of their own kind. "How long until they reach us?" Sarah asked, her translator converting her words into precise vibrations. 3 lunar cycles, Eric's responded. "They follow the magnetic ley lines, draining each settlement they encounter. We have always hidden or fooled before. But this time," their form dimmed. "This time the storm damage has left too many unable to travel." Sarah accessed her tablet's database, reviewing everything she had learned about Lumerian biology and culture. The obsidian nomads' ability to drain energy from other crystal beings made them nearly impossible for the peaceful Lumerians to fight. But perhaps that very specialization could be turned against them. "Tell me everything about how they drain energy," Sarah requested, her scientific mind already formulating possibilities. "The exact frequency they use, the range of their absorption, any weaknesses you've observed." As Eric shared their knowledge, Sarah began to understand. The nomads used a specific resonance frequency to disrupt the natural energy patterns of other crystal beings, making it possible to absorb their life force. It was similar to how some Earth parasites suppress their hosts' immune responses. "Your people's peaceful nature isn't a weakness," Sarah said suddenly, looking up from her calculations. "It's the key to your defense. You've evolved to share energy harmoniously, while they force themselves into sync with their victims. That means they're vulnerable to frequency disruption in a way you aren't." The next days were a flurry of activity. Sarah worked with the Lumerian scientists, combining her understanding of wave physics with their intimate knowledge of crystal resonance. Together, they developed a plan that would use the nomads' own energy-draining abilities against them. They modified the crystal network, reinforcing key nodes with precisely calibrated resonators. Each was tuned to detect the nomad's distinctive absorption frequency and respond with a countering harmonic that would disrupt their ability to drain energy. But the real genius of the plan lay in its distributed nature. Instead of trying to fight them directly, Sarah explained to the gathered community, "We'll turn their attack into a form of feedback loop. The more they try to drain, the more their own energy patterns will be thrown into chaos." Some of the elder Lumerians expressed concern about using their network as a weapon, even in defense. Their vibrations carried frequencies of moral uncertainty. Sarah understood their reluctance. Their entire society was built on harmonious energy exchange. "This isn't about destroying them," she assured the elders. "It's about making it impossible for them to harm others. Think of it as enforcing harmony rather than creating discord." The preparation brought unexpected benefits. As they modified the crystal network, Sarah and the Lumerians discovered new ways to strengthen their communications. The defensive modifications actually improved the network's overall efficiency, allowing for clearer, stronger connections between settlements. When the obsidian nomads finally appeared on the horizon, their dark crystalline forms absorbing the light rather than refracting it, the defenders were ready. Sarah watched through her suit's enhanced optical systems as the raiders approached the first line of modified crystals. The lead nomad attempted to initiate its drainage frequency. Immediately, the defensive network responded, generating a complex counter-resonance that caused the raider to stagger. Its dark crystal form flickered with confused energy patterns as it tried to adjust its absorption frequency. The other nomads pressed forward, each attempting to drain energy in their own way. But every attempt was met with precisely calculated interference patterns. The more they tried to force their way through, the more their own energy systems became disrupted. Sarah monitored the battle through her instruments, making minute adjustments to the defensive frequencies as needed. The Lumerians maintained the network, their natural ability to share energy keeping the system stable despite the chaos the nomads were inadvertently creating. The turning point came when one of the younger nomads, its energy patterns severely disrupted, began generating frequencies that Sarah recognized as communication attempts. Unlike the others, it wasn't trying to force its way through the defenses. It was trying to understand them. Eric's, showing remarkable courage, responded to the communication. Through the network, they offered an alternative to the cycle of predation, the possibility of learning to share energy harmoniously, as the Lumerians did. The young nomad's form brightened with interest, its dark crystal beginning to show hints of translucency. This change triggered a cascade effect. Other nomads, seeing one of their own beginning to transform, started to question their ways. The defensive network, responding to their shifting energy patterns, began generating harmonious frequencies that showed them how to integrate with the larger crystal community. Not all the nomads were ready to change. Some retreated, their dark forms disappearing back into the distance. But others stayed, working with the Lumerians to understand a new way of existing. Sarah watched in amazement as former raiders learned to participate in the energy-sharing network they had once sought to drain. "You've shown us that strength doesn't have to come from taking," Eric's transmitted to Sarah as they watched the integration process. "Sometimes the strongest defense is showing others a better way to live." Sarah nodded, understanding that she had witnessed something far more significant than a mere tactical victory. The Lumerians had found a way to defend themselves while staying true to their principles of harmony and cooperation. More than that, they had transformed enemies into allies through understanding rather than destruction. The modified crystal network hummed with new frequencies as former nomads added their unique perspectives to the community's communications. Their experience with different energy patterns, once used for predation, now contributed to a deeper understanding of crystal resonance. As the twin moons rose over the crystalline plains, Sarah realized that this challenge had proven something important about both species. Humans could contribute more than just technical solutions. They could help others find new ways to solve age-old problems. And the Lumerians had shown that maintaining one's principles in the face of threat could lead to transformative solutions. The story of how a human scientist helped defend a crystal civilization would spread across the stars, but the true lesson wasn't about the technology or tactics. It was about the power of understanding, adaptation, and the courage to offer harmony even to those who initially sought to destroy it. Knowledge exchange. In the wake of the Nomad crisis, Sarah's makeshift laboratory had become a hub of constant activity. What began as a simple survival shelter had evolved into a unique fusion of human and Lemurian technology. Crystal formations grew in precise patterns around her salvaged equipment, their resonance frequencies amplifying and refining her instrument's capabilities in ways she had never imagined possible. Eric's hovered near a particularly complex crystal array, their form shifting through subtle color variations as they helped calibrate a new communication device. Your electrical signals, they transmitted, they're not so different from our resonance patterns. Just faster, more chaotic. Sarah adjusted her tablet's interface, watching as human binary code was converted into crystalline frequencies and back again. That's what makes this translation project so fascinating, she replied. We're not just creating a dictionary of words, we're building a bridge between two fundamentally different ways of processing reality. The breakthrough had come when Sarah realized that Lemurian crystal structures could be grown in ways that naturally converted electrical impulses into their resonance-based communications. It wasn't just translation, it was true integration of their technologies. A group of former nomads, their once dark crystals now showing swirls of translucent color, contributed unique insights to the project. Their experience with manipulating energy frequencies gave them an intuitive understanding of how to bridge the gap between electrical and crystalline systems. Your people's machines, one of them transmitted, their frequencies carrying tones of revelation. They're like frozen thoughts, waiting to be awakened. We never understood before. We thought your technology was dead, like inert mineral. But it lives in its own way. Sarah smiled behind her helmet. And we never understood that crystals could be so alive, so conscious. Sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to see what should have been obvious. She paused, considering. That's why the translation project is just the beginning. Working together, they had begun developing hybrid technologies that combine the best aspects of both civilizations. Lemurian crystal growing techniques, guided by human computer modeling, produced structures with unprecedented properties. Sarah's scientific instruments, enhanced by crystal resonance, achieved sensitivity levels that would have seemed impossible on Earth. But the exchange went far deeper than mere technology. The Lemurians began to understand human concepts of individual identity and linear time, while Sarah gained insight into their collective consciousness and cyclical perspective. Each species found their worldview expanding, challenged and enriched by the other's fundamental differences. Watch this, Sarah said one day, activating a new device they had created together. A holographic display sprang to life, but instead of using traditional light projection, it utilized crystalline resonance to create three-dimensional images that could be felt as well as seen. The Lemurians could literally touch and interact with human data structures. And here, Eric's responded, demonstrating how they had modified their network to accommodate human thought patterns. Through careful frequency modulation, they could now share not just information but experiences, memories, and emotions in ways that human nervous systems could process. The implications were staggering. Medical applications alone could revolutionize both societies. Lemurian healing frequencies, properly translated, could offer new treatments for human ailments. Meanwhile, human understanding of cellular biology suggested ways for the crystal beings to repair and enhance their own structures. But with each advancement came new questions. The elder Lemurians expressed concern about maintaining their cultural identity in the face of such rapid change. Some humans, receiving Sarah's reports through the newly established communication channels, worried about the security implications of such intimate technological integration. Change doesn't mean loss, Sarah argued during a joint council session. Her words carried through the crystal network. Look at the former nomads. They haven't lost their identity by joining your community. They've expanded it. they'd become more than they were, while remaining true to their essential nature. The council chamber, a vast crystalline dome filled with beings of both species, resonated with thoughtful frequencies. The merged communication system allowed everyone present to truly understand each other's perspectives, fears, and hopes. A young Lumerian scientist, their form pulsing with excitement, demonstrated a new application they had developed. Using human-inspired programming techniques, they had created a way to store and share emotional experiences through the crystal network. It was like a library of feelings, a way to preserve and understand the full depth of both species' experiences. This is what real progress looks like, Erics transmitted, their frequencies carrying pride and optimism. Not one species teaching the other, but both growing together, finding new possibilities neither could have imagined alone. Sarah watched as human researchers, arriving on newly established transport routes, worked side by side with Lumerian scientists. Each discovery led to new questions. Each solution opened doors to further mysteries. The fear that had initially divided their species had been transformed into shared curiosity. The crystal network, now spanning significant portions of the planet, hummed with constant exchange. Human music, translated into crystal frequencies, created new art forms. Lumerian philosophical concepts, rendered into human language, offered new ways of understanding consciousness and community. "We were so afraid of being consumed," one of the elder Lumerians transmitted during a quiet moment. "We never imagined that sharing could make both species stronger." Sarah nodded, remembering her own first terrified moments on this crystal world. "Fear sees only threat or opportunity," she replied. "Understanding sees partners and possibilities." As the twin moons cast their light across the crystalline landscape, Sarah realized that they had created something unprecedented. Not just a meeting of different species, but a true synthesis of civilizations. The crystal towers now pulse with both electrical and resonance energy, a physical manifestation of their successful integration. The story of their collaboration would spread across the galaxy, offering hope to other species struggling to overcome their differences. It proved that the greatest discoveries often came not from conquering or competing, but from finding ways to combine seemingly incompatible perspectives into something entirely new. Legacy of Trust. 5 years after Sarah Chen's crash landing on Lumeria, the planet had become the galaxy's premier example of successful interspecies collaboration. The once feared world of living crystals now hosted a thriving joint community where humans and Lumerians worked together to push the boundaries of science and culture. Sarah stood at the observation deck of the newly constructed Resonance Academy, her environment suit now integrated with crystalline technology that allowed her to communicate directly through the planet's network. Below her, human students learned the art of crystal growing from Lumerian masters, while Lumerian youth studied human engineering principles. Did you ever imagine this? Erics transmitted, their form shimmering with the complex patterns that Sarah now recognized as profound satisfaction. "When you fell from our sky, when I hid from you in terror." Sarah laughed, the sound converting automatically into pleasant harmonics through the crystal network. "I was just hoping to survive. Instead, we built something that's changing both our civilizations." The Academy itself was a testament to their success, a living structure that grew and adapted to its inhabitants' needs, combining human architectural principles with Lumerian organic crystal growth. Its halls resonated with multiple forms of communication, translation crystals ensuring perfect understanding between species. But the most remarkable changes weren't in the technology or architecture. They were in the ways both species had learned to see themselves and each other. Humans had discovered new depths of community and interconnection, while Lumerians had embraced individual innovation without losing their collective harmony. A group of former nomads, now serving as instructors in energy manipulation, demonstrated advanced techniques to a mixed class of human and Lumerian students. Their once destructive abilities had been transformed into healing arts, teaching others how to repair damaged crystal structures and maintain healthy energy flow. "The galaxy's watching us," Sarah noted, reviewing reports from various spacefaring civilizations. They want to understand how we overcame our differences so completely. Eric's form pulsed with thoughtful frequencies, perhaps because we never tried to overcome them at all. We simply learned to see them as strengths rather than barriers. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the Planetary Defense Network. Another ship was approaching. But unlike Sarah's crash landing years ago, this arrival was expected. The vessel carried representatives from 12 different species, all interested in learning from the Lumerian-human collaboration. As they watched the ship descend, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The defense network, originally modified to repel the nomads, now served as a comprehensive communication and guidance system, helping visitors navigate Lumeria's unique atmospheric conditions safely. "Remember how we developed that system in Crisis?" Sarah asked. "Now it's welcoming new friends instead of repelling threats. A pattern we've repeated often," Eric's transmitted, taking something born of fear and transforming it into a tool for connection. The diplomatic vessel landed smoothly, guided by crystalline beacons. As the representatives emerged, Sarah and Eric's moved to greet them. Each visitor wore a specially designed translation crystal, allowing them to participate in the planet's unified communication network immediately upon arrival. The gathering that followed in the Academy's Grand Chamber was unprecedented. 15 different species, each with their own unique biology and way of perceiving reality, all able to communicate clearly through the crystal network. The chamber itself adapted to accommodate their various environmental needs, demonstrating the practical applications of human Lumerian technology. "Tell us," requested a representative from a gaseous species. Their words carried perfectly through the crystal frequencies. "How did you begin this transformation?" Sarah and Eric's shared a glance, their years of friendship evident in the harmonious resonance between them. Together, they recounted their story, not just the events, but the deeper journey from fear to understanding, from survival to collaboration, from difference to synthesis. As they spoke, the chamber's crystals displayed their shared memories, allowing the gathered representatives to experience key moments in the development of their partnership. They felt the initial terror of first contact, the triumph of solving the storm-damaged crisis, the tension of the nomad confrontation, and the joy of each breakthrough in communication and technology. But the most important thing we learned, Sarah concluded, was that true progress doesn't require any species to become less than they are. It comes from finding ways to become more together than we could ever be alone. The impact of their success reached far beyond Lumeria. Other worlds began adopting their methods of cross-species communication and collaboration. The crystal translation technology, refined through years of human-Lumerian partnership, helped bridge gaps between civilizations that had long struggled to understand each other. Research teams composed of multiple species became common, each contributing their unique perspectives and abilities to solve complex problems. The Resonance Academy expanded, establishing satellite campuses on other worlds, each adapted to local conditions while maintaining the core principles of harmonic cooperation. Even the former nomads played a crucial role in this expansion, their experience with transformation making them ideal ambassadors to species struggling with change. They demonstrated that evolution didn't have to mean losing oneself. It could mean becoming a better version of what you already were. As the twin moons rose over Lumeria that evening, casting their violet light across the crystalline landscape, Sarah and Eric stood together at their favorite observation point. The planet below them pulsed with the combined energy of multiple species working, learning, and growing together. "We've created something beautiful," Sarah said, her words carried through the crystal network she had once feared as alien and incomprehensible. "No," Eric's corrected, their forms shimmering with all the colors they had learned to share with human eyes. "We've created something true." The beauty was always there, in the possibility of understanding between different forms of life. We just had to be brave enough to see it. The crystal towers of Lumeria glowed with internal light, each one a testament to what could be achieved when fear gave way to curiosity, when difference became opportunity, when strangers became partners in creation. Their story had become more than just a tale of successful first contact. It was proof that the greatest adventures in the universe began not with conquest or competition, but with the simple courage to reach across the void and trust in the possibility of connection. As new ships arrived in Lumeria's sky, carrying more seekers of knowledge and understanding, Sarah and Eric's knew that their work would continue. Each new species brought fresh challenges and opportunities, new ways of seeing and being. But they were ready, confident in the knowledge that diversity wasn't an obstacle to be overcome. It was the very force that drove the universe forward into ever greater harmony. The legacy they had built would extend far beyond their own lifetimes, a living proof that the gap between any two forms of life could be bridged by those willing to learn each other's songs. In the end, that was the greatest discovery of all. That in a universe of infinite diversity, understanding itself was the most powerful force for transformation.